This is the E-commerce Edge podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. Buddy, and welcome to another episode of the E-commerce Edge podcast. I've got a couple of amazing guests lined up for you today, but before we jump right into that, I'd like to encourage you to go and follow, subscribe, and share on whatever podcast channel you are listening on. We have an amazing back catalog of over 430 episodes of the podcast, but we always appreciate a share and a like. It helps us with the algo gods, and it helps us to get our message spread far and wide out there. But without further ado, I would love to welcome Prashant, MAHAJAN, and Bianca Blake from Klickrr to the podcast. Welcome, you two.
Thank you, Jason.
Yes,
it's amazing to have you guys along for the ride today, this Friday morning. And we're here to talk about Klickrr. But before we talk about your technology and your platform and what it does, why don't you introduce yourselves? Tell us how you even came to be in this space. Prashant, I know you're the founder of Klickrr and you're the chief architect and engineer behind the Klickrr platform. What drew you into this space, this digital marketing via text messaging space? What drew you in?
The simple answer to this is actually Bianca. She's the one who pulled me into this. So we both are co-founders of Klickrr, and we both have known each other since, I guess, last 10 years now. We both used to work in another startup in West Africa, and that's where we met. And we started thinking around with smaller projects here and there. And one thing that I think we both realized was that our synergies were matching and our wavelength was also matching. So we started building different products. First product was an app that didn't fly, and then there was another product called Peephole that we both were working. And then as the product evolved, we did the pivot and pivoting, and then eventually we ended up with SMS or SMS texting. So that's how. It was not something that we both thought right from the beginning, but the market told us that, okay, this is the product that we both have to focus on. So essentially, yeah, that's how we got into this.
Love it. And Bianca, it's amazing, before you jump into sort of your side of things, it's amazing when I see there's definitely a trend amongst the most successful platform technology companies. There's usually 2 or 3 founders, and they have their distinct areas of expertise. Usually you've got like a technical side, you've got a marketing side, maybe you have a brand side, maybe you have a creative side. And it feels like when 2 founders with distinct skill sets combine forces, it definitely creates a much higher likelihood of success.
So I 100% agree to this question. This is, for both of us, it's the third startup that we both are doing. And the good thing about both of us is that we both complement each other so well. Like Bianca is totally about the business side and I'm totally about the technical side. So both of us are able to cover the full domain. And that really helps. That's how I think it works for us.
For sure. I'm definitely the non-technical person. So specializing in all of the other things, mainly marketing. That is my background, strategic marketing, which is helpful because Prashant is the tech guru. He can build anything. But having the perspective of some of the types of clients that we are looking to land with the platforms that we're building, I think helps with designing some of the software that he's building in the earlier stages, which helps build more efficiently. So to Prashant's point, we have very different skill sets. Couldn't be more different, I don't think. But we're similar where it counts, which is important.
Yeah. And Bianca, how did you identify this market gap? Was it you were scratching your own itch and you needed a technology for yourself and for your business and for your marketing and you decided to commercialize it? Or did you just identify a gap in the market and say, hey, look, we think we can do this better than anyone else. We think we can build a cutting edge platform that's going to be useful to businesses of all shapes and sizes. Like, how did you pivot into what Klickrr ultimately became?
It was out of frustration, to be honest. And initially, as Prashant mentioned, I was running a marketing consulting firm. He was a consultant as well, building technology and building software for companies. And we were working together on a startup. I was running the marketing department. He was building the tech. It was tech first. So tech was way more important than marketing, but I was there running the marketing department and we'd come into the office here and there. And what I was noticing with my marketing agency was that when I was bringing customers on, I was doing the same thing over and over again. And I'm like, this is taking too much. I was a team of one at the time, just getting started. And I'm like, I do not have time for this onboarding. So I'm like, Prashant, I need your help. I need some systems here. And so after we had done all the work for the client, we would go back to or have team dinners and things. And I would just be asking them, like, can you take a look at my site? Is there any way that I can systemize this onboarding process, or can I do something? And Prashant always has a code. There's a code for everything, right? It just very quickly, it's almost like a little magic wand or something. It just poof, there's code. And all of a sudden something that's taking me days to do would take 5 minutes and can actually be offloaded to the client to self-serve, do it yourself type of thing. So that's how it started. And so I started asking more and more questions. Can we do things that pain points that I was finding in my consultancy, which was mainly based on strategic marketing. And if you know anything about strategy, most clients want to skip the strategy because it's not tangible, if you will, and go straight to tactics. I want to see my name up in lights. I want the big campaign. I want the video asset, whatever it is that you're doing for marketing. You want, I'm like, okay, great. What are we going to say in the video? Like, what, you got to have some strategy in order for you to get to execution. So the question that I was asking Prashant is, how can we make strategy seamless, easy, cheap, efficient? Is that how can we get the technology to help really make strategy quick and efficient so that they would stick with me on the strategy journey so we could get to execution, and our execution would be much more optimal because we at least thought through a few of the strategic inputs that I needed to get to execution. So we started building a platform. To Prashant's point, we built a couple of other things that for one or more reasons didn't see the light of day, but we actually started building something that could help small businesses, medium-sized businesses that were just starting, get after some of this strategic thinking that large companies can pay your big consulting firms to do for them in a more efficient way. And we were connecting it to a lot of digital marketing platforms like your search platforms, your social platforms, we were connecting this strategy in so you could answer a few questions, think of it, and boom, you could use that as a foundation for all of your marketing in a more seamless way. Texting was part of that platform. We put the pieces on the market, individual a la carte, and people just went after the texting. Like, yeah, that strategy stuff is great, but we want to send these text messages. And so we listened to the market and kept it simple, got rid of all the other things that we thought were great, but weren't really being responded to in a positive way, and just doubled down on texting. And it served us well over the last however many years.
Wow. And so texting, it's an interesting one because almost every single brand you know of in the market, they do heavy email marketing, they do heavy social marketing, paid, performance, organic, SEO, possibly even radio. When you combine traditional and digital marketing channels, there's a bewildering array of opportunities out there for brands to get in front of their customers on a regular basis. But it feels like text-based, SMS-based marketing is, I don't want to say it's new because there's definitely been technologies out there for a long time that have been able to help you do text marketing. So it's definitely not a new technology. It's definitely not new to smartphones, but it definitely feels like for many brands, it is an afterthought, or it is something that is not a core part of their marketing mix today. Why do you think that is? Why do you think it's one of the last things that most brands think of as a regular communication channel with their customers? Why do you think that it for example, that it doesn't get as much airtime as email marketing, for example?
Yes, I'll start here. I think that it's because you can't help but think of texting in your business. You can't help but think of it as a similar way as you think of it in your personal life. And they're two very different things. If you think about some of those other platforms that you mentioned, most people, up until the last few years where smartphones have very good cameras on, most of us were not taking cinematography, video, and we weren't doing that. Thinking about an advertisement coming from a business, that made sense. Businesses do these beautiful 30-second ads. You see them on TV. Businesses do radio ads. Most of us, you're a podcaster, so you have a microphone, but most of us are not doing radio. That's just not in our lives. Most of us aren't putting search terms. That's just not what we're doing. Everybody sends text messages. So as a channel, you already live in the mind of the client. And the equity of texting is I'm texting my friend, my mom, my sister, my cousin, this quick thing. Hey, are you up? Are you there yet? Are you on your way? Like these. And so divorcing sort of the mentality of the peer-to-peer, P2P or peer-to-peer texting, which is what we're used to, from app-to-peer texting, which is what requires software, SMS gateway, requires you to have a list to take, requires compliance, requires people to be able to opt in and opt out. It's a very different thing. I like to say that texting is where social media marketing was about 10 years ago, when we knew how to use it to communicate with our friends. But the idea of approaching an enterprise company and saying, hey, you can be building your brand on social media was just, are you kidding me that my kid uses this to message his friends? And then if you think about where banner ads were 20 years ago, I don't know, Jason, if you remember those flickering banner ads where if you click on one, it would create like an infinity mirror. And it was like it would be difficult to sell that into a reputable director of marketing and say, hey, you should be using this to build your brand. But now here we are, and banner ads are beautiful. They fit very nicely within the context of the website they're in. They're targeted, they're designed, and most of the social media companies, the majority of their revenue comes from advertising, and advertising that's paid from these very large blue chip companies. So texting is on a journey, and I think the issue here is that what we have to do as a company who is putting a text messaging gateway onto the market is explain to people how it differs from what they're used to and how their business can benefit from having a more direct and intimate, if you will, relationship. What it is, what it's not, what messages should be communicated via text message, what messages should not, so that you don't end up in a situation where you do generate that icky feeling of, oh, they're spamming me or they're texting me something that I don't want to receive. So it's on the companies that are creating these text messaging platforms to do a certain level of due diligence with their own platform, and also inform their users that you don't want to be opportunistic. This is not a platform where you just blast everybody and hope somebody responds. You need to be a little bit more responsible and pay attention to compliance. It is very different. We are on a journey. So you're right. It is new. Texting itself is not new, but texting in this way, where it's a bona fide media platform that you measure in the same way as you measure print, out of home, like those types. It's new. It's newly being treated in that way.
Yeah, there's no question about that. Now, I'm originally from California, born and raised, but lived in New Zealand for almost 30 years. Now I've been living in Mexico for the last year and a half. And texting seems to be somewhat of a unique channel that is really dominant in the United States. But it's not as common as a communication channel, especially for businesses in Mexico, New Zealand, Australia, UK, Europe, where in these countries, speaking specifically of Mexico now, WhatsApp is the communication channel of choice, right? Even amongst friends, right? The SMS is just, you wouldn't SMS, 99% of the time, you wouldn't SMS someone, even a family or a friend. You would use something like WhatsApp, or you would use, in Asia, you would use WeChat. You wouldn't even think of SMS anymore. But do you think that this whole SMS heavy society in terms of comms, messaging communications, do you think this is somewhat of a unique American phenomenon, that this communication channel still seems to be hanging on as a preferred method of communication, smartphone to smartphone? Or do you see this, I guess I'm asking you, is your target market the United States primarily because it is such a text heavy society?
Yes, we our target market right now is states, and you're absolutely right, and your observation is absolutely right about the states as well as the rest of the countries. So in rest of the countries, people are adopting to WhatsApp, to different other messaging protocols and different systems. Our Klickr's forte is more in business messaging as opposed to PM messaging. And the good thing about United States is that in US, businesses are still reliant more on SMSs, and personal messaging is more about WhatsApp, Facebook, and all those things. So there is a clear segregation between what the official message is supposed to follow, the protocols that the official message is supposed to follow, and what the person message is supposed to follow. So that helps us in a sense that we don't have to be part of the crowd and say that, okay, let's do texting through WhatsApp, through Facebook, and this and that. We can really focus on business messaging this way and just follow the compliance in that sense, and then get through the messaging.
Yeah, and I guess that's my point, is that here in Mexico, in India, in New Zealand, Australia, even for businesses, WhatsApp is becoming like the normal channel of communication. Here in Mexico, everything from Amazon to every business I interact with, it's via WhatsApp. And they message you via WhatsApp. They send you quotes via WhatsApp. You can execute transactions via WhatsApp. So definitely it feels like this unique phenomenon of this cultural approach to business messaging. It seems to be a little bit uniquely United States focused in terms of SMS being that business communication channel.
Yeah, obviously, and that's why there are other reasons as well for us to stay in states. But yeah, business messaging is pretty much about texting in states so far, right? So that is also reason why we are sticking to this channel. Messaging can be of so many times, just like you're saying, WhatsApp, there is iMessage, you name it, there is WeChat. But then the thing about, at least I can speak for India for sure, that in India there is no segregation between business messaging and personal messaging. People use WhatsApp for both business messaging as well as personal messaging. So water is a lot more muddy in those markets. But US is all about finding verticals. So business messaging is primarily about texting, and that is what helps people to know as well, that if someone is contacting me through SMS, then this is supposed to be an official message, and perhaps the message should not be coming after 5 p.m. my time, right? So that helps us to set the protocols and ensure that our customers know what protocols to follow, and our customer are also expecting the messages at certain times only.
Yeah, I will also echo what Prashant is saying. I think in the US, there are some regulations that might keep businesses off of apps that are owned by other companies, that might keep their list, their data, their messages, all of the behaviors that they're having off of those apps. Text messaging is on federally regulated communications channel, similar to phone calls. So there are certain things that you cannot text about. There are certain protocols that you have to follow as far as being able to opt in and opt out that you just don't have to on other apps. You should, but if you don't, it's a privately owned app. These are private companies, or some of them are publicly traded companies, but no one owns texting. So there is a little bit of a difference. Also, while there are billions of people that have these messaging apps, there's going to be more people that have access to text messaging in every market than that have access to privately owned apps. You literally have to download WeChat or WhatsApp to your phone and log into it to be able to use it. You do not have to do that with text messaging. So this unlocks others, especially for e-commerce businesses who have targets that are, not to be ageist, but we find that most people over the age of 60, either they have smartphones and aren't as up to speed on some of the latest features, or they might not have as much memory to download a ton of apps, or they just want to use their phone for calling and not have a million apps on it. So that segment specifically would be more likely to get messaging through a text than through WhatsApp or some other messaging service. And there are other pockets like this as well, where you can just be much more inclusive in your messaging channels if you were to include texting as an option, especially in the US. So there's a ton of reasons why business texting makes sense, specifically in the US. We focus on the US and Canada specifically, but yeah, and there's things that you can't text about. So I didn't even get into that, but I think businesses want to be careful about compliance, and some of these apps, they're starting to get in a little bit of hot water about how they manage communications and how they manage behaviors on their apps. And some businesses don't want to be involved with that. And then some of their leadership can sometimes be in the news, and then businesses don't want to be associated. So texting's never going to have that. There's never going to be a CEO of a text messaging platform or whatever. Like, the texting communication channel itself is never going to have that level of PR. So it's much safer for businesses to use overall.
Sure. And when you first start working with a new brand, a new client, a new merchant, do you expect them to typically have a ready-made, similar to a mailing list? If you run Klaviyo, then obviously you have to get subscribers and people have to opt in to hearing from you outside of just the pure transactional emails. When clients first start working with you, do you expect them to have a cohort in their database that has already opted into hearing from them via the cell phone channel, so to speak? Or do you have databases that your customers can access or pay for? Or do you help them start setting up the approval process to hearing from the brand via text message? Like, what does the onboarding process look like when a brand wants to start adopting business text messaging, whether it be for transactional purposes and order updates, etc., or push notifications around campaigns, etc.? What does the workflow look like to get a brand onboarded into your platform?
Okay, do not sell any cell phone database. That's non-compliant and perhaps illegal as well. What we do is two things. If the customer is new, then we help the customer to build his own database, his own cell phone database. If the customer already has a database of numbers, an opt-in database of numbers, then we can use it while adding to the database as well. So these are the two type of customers that we take on. But yes, it's not compliant to sell numbers. Like that's illegal.
And so let's say that up until the point where they onboard with you, they have never asked their customers to opt in to receiving text messages from them. Is it a scenario where then you would recommend that they send, for example, maybe they've already opted in for email, that they would send like an email campaign, say, click here to opt in to receiving text messages, special promotions, whatever? What is the stepping stone process if they've never even asked their customer base to receive text messages before? What is the process to go through to jump through those legal hoops to make sure they're compliant, to make sure that the customer opts in? Or is it a case of you can send them a one-time message for the very first time to their SMS asking them to opt in or opt out? What are the regulations around this if the customer hasn't explicitly opted in when they created an account with you?
That's a great question. And I like the way that you asked it. So there's a few ways that we help our customers build this. One of them is through using Klickrr keywords. So if someone texts you first, they're opted in, right? So it's great. It's a great way to be able to use other parts of your marketing mix that you're already using. You mentioned email. It could be some people have brick and mortar, hang a poster outside, what a shopper marketing, like stuff that's in your store kind of thing. Say, hey, text ecom to this number or whatever your brand, we like it to be as short as possible because people start to mix up letters if you make it too long. But we have one, text Klickrr to our phone number, and right then you're joining a list, and we keep a dynamic running list of that. So if you're at a conference, this works really well. If you're a keynote speaker or having a podcast or something like that, and you're like, hey guys, we're starting this text messaging outreach. We're going to be distributing all of our information via text. We'll text you infrequently, maybe once a month, with all the links to our latest stuff. If you want to be on this list, text ecom to whatever the number is, and we'll make sure to add you. So there's multiple ways of doing that. We also, Prashant has, I said, code for everything. Within every single Klickrr account, he has built a complimentary code that you can answer a few questions, and it will build a pop-up, if you will, or a button that will go on your website, so that for all of the website traffic, you can start capturing that. For those companies that do already have phone numbers, they can ask people if they'll be willing to join a text, and then we could just upload that list, and then they can send them that welcome message, to your point, say, hey, as we mentioned, we're starting text messaging campaign. You stop to opt out. If you're not opting out, we'll assume that you are happy to receive our information, and we'll be texting you about A, B, C, and D. So it's really important. I think the opt-in is really important because there's a few things that people are opting into. They're opting into receiving messages from you. They're opting into receiving, you meaning your company. They're opting into receiving message at the phone number, which means that you shouldn't be sharing a phone number with some other company. They're saying, Jason is sending me these messages from this phone number, right? They're opting into a cadence. So you got to let them know, how frequently are you sending messages? You don't want to tell them, people generally use messaging frequency varies. But in reality, it'll be great to know, is this a once a month thing? Is it a daily digest of stuff? Is it like because we all get messages sometimes that are fine to get, but we just don't want to be receiving them 10 times a day. So the messaging frequency, I'm opting into that, and you should adhere to that. And the subject. So if you say that I'm going to be sending you links to podcasts, if I publish a podcast every week, and at the end of the month, I'm going to send you links to 4 podcasts, then what you shouldn't be doing is starting sending pictures of you and your friends at a cool event. Hey, look at us. Nope, I didn't opt in for that. I opted in to get this digest. So it's very important when we're onboarding, to Prashant's point, to educate our customers, because texting, as I mentioned before, the peer-to-peer texting is free for all. You can text your friends whatever you want. Hey, there's this article I read. Text them the next day. Hey, what are you doing? I want to go. So it can be informational. It can be persuasive. It can be some funny joke, whatever. But when it comes to business texting, there are rules that you should adhere to. Less people will start opting out, and that's not good for anyone. We help them with the keywords. We help them with the list building. We help them make sure that their existing list of folks are well aware. We help them with an email that they can send out if they have emails saying, hey guys, just so you're opted into this thing, this is what's happening. We help them with their website to make sure the website is appropriate to receive the traffic that they're sending there. If they're sending a text message and it has a deep link to a page on the website, like making sure that's all connected, that the message that you're sending, the link that you're sending, clicks them through to something that has something to do with them. And so we partner with our clients to make sure that all of these dots are connected, because it's very easy to send a text message. Our system and our platform was made to be super simple, 160 alphanumeric characters. It's very easy to send it. It's not as easy to send a good text message. And that's where we come in.
And do you find that is one of the biggest educational challenges, is that brands, I would assume the brands want to treat SMS messaging as like email, like they would their email list. They would oftentimes brands will be sending out an email a day, an email a week. The amount of campaigns that a brand may have running across email at any given point in time can be pretty overwhelming as a recipient. I can tell you right now, as a person who's opted into lists of brands, even here in Mexico, most of these brands, they'll be sending like an email a day. And so do they come in, when they first start working with you, do they come in with a similar mindset? They're going, oh, great, cool, we can send an SMS a day to our customers just like we would an email. But the sanctity of the text inbox feels, because of the lack of text management technology versus inbox management technology that can be auto filtered, and you can auto block, and you can put emails into folders automatically based on vendor. There's lots of things we can do with email to manage our inboxes, even to the point of having a promotional email address that we subscribe to just to hear from brands, right? We keep that out of our main personal inbox, for example. There's no such thing. That doesn't exist for text messaging. And so it all comes into one text message inbox, and there's not a lot of ways that we can easily control that apart from blocking somebody's number. There's not a lot of control we have over that. And as a result of that, it feels like the text inbox is more sacred to most people than their email inbox. And is that an educational piece that you have to extend to your customers when you're onboarding them?
I need to explain a few things, right? So there is a big difference between emailing and texting. They both appear similar, just if you're looking at looking from top to down. But emailing is more passive. So if you're sending an email, the person may or may not see the within 5 minutes, within 30 minutes. He or she may see the email after 1 day. Texting or calling is different. Call is supposed to be picked up in 10 seconds. Texting, usually, if you're actually going to send a text message to somebody, the person would usually see it. Based on the data, person would usually see the message within 30 minutes. So it's much more active, and the responses and the type of campaigns that you're supposed to send with texting are different than the type of campaigns that you're supposed to send with emails. So the whole business model around emailing and texting is actually different. Plus, there is a cost factor involved in this scenario as well. Emailing, contacting 10,000 people via email is much less, is very inexpensive. Contacting 10,000 or sending 10,000 text messages is perhaps going to cost you $200, $300, $400, depending on the message that you're trying to send. So obviously there is a huge blood and sweat that will be spent in drafting the message, what is supposed to be sent, when it is supposed to be sent. With emailing, you have the luxury of sending the emails whenever you want to, more or less. But the texting, you cannot send the text message at 12 o'clock in the night. People would start shouting at you, and they will stop your message. Carriers would also block your number right away. Emailing is very different. Emailing is something that you can send them the email. People do send the email at 4 o'clock in the morning, so that the person, whenever he will get up in the morning, first my email would be at the top. Texting does not work like this. So based on our business understanding, I think that both of us think that it's very different. Now, coming to the brands. Now, when the brands start working with us, we make them understand that, first of all, this is not email. If you are going to send the text message, your customer should be ready to read the message there and then, because the orders start the orders start pouring like this. You send the text message, you send a text campaign to 10,000 people. Right now, most of our customers will get, depending on the ticket size, orders start flowing within 15 minutes, and the orders flow finish in an hour or so. So the full show starts within 15 minutes and the full show ends within an hour. So it's different. With emailing, the show will go on for 1 day and 2 days, right? So it's different that way. So texting will be very good. For example, if you have a Black Friday sale, you send the text message in the morning and you will see that the people are going to respond. You try to do the same with email. People will not even read the email, let alone sending the orders. So the domain is very different, right? So that's something that we educate, and we also work with our customers to build their campaigns to be sent at the right time to the right audiences, as opposed to irritating the customers by blasting them too many messages. It makes more sense for us to just send perhaps 1 or 2 messages per month. First of all, it's cost effective. Second of all, people would appreciate your honesty as well, that you're not trying to bombard the customer with too many messages or too many irrelevant messages. You're sending the customer the message at the right time and giving them the right information, as opposed to having a generic email template with lots and lots of photographs that are mostly irrelevant to me and won't have action points. You have, in most of the emails, you may have multiple action points. You can go to 50% sale, 25% sale, go to the website. In texting, more often than not, you will have a single action point. So the customers are very focused. You will either, most of the customers would either send a phone number that, okay, contact me or give me a call back, or they will say that, okay, click this link. And that's it. So all my customers are very much guided and very much focused into doing one action point and one only. So the responses and adding to that responses, like I said, every action will happen within next 45 minutes. So timing is so the customers are ready to receive the orders, and they will receive the orders or donations, whatever you have to do. And so that's how the mechanics, the market, the way that you're going to send the campaigns, it's not apples to apples. It's very different if you go deep into this.
I'll add just one last thing to what Prashant said, is that the text message inbox is pretty sacred, but I don't want the audience here to think that it's just a free for all or a Wild West. There are plenty of things that are done on the back end to make sure that erroneous messages do not get delivered into your text inbox. I know it may not feel that way when you're receiving a million text messages per day that you feel like you didn't opt into, but all of the phone numbers that we send text messages from, they have to go through a validation process where we tell the carriers who is sending this message, what company, where their address, who's the contact. You have to get your messages whitelisted, if you will, to be sent, or else they'll be filtered. And there are some, I know Android does it, I believe Apple does it as well, where if they pick up that some spam messages are coming through, you have to search for it because I know you don't want to see them. There is a little bit of a search, the spam filter in your text messages. Like I said, I know it doesn't feel that way if you're getting unwanted messages, but for brands that are trying to send spam messages, we don't send them on our platform. We don't recommend it, but also the carriers are starting to get a little bit more savvy in filtering them ahead of time and filtering them as they're sent. And I'll say one other thing with our platform is that if someone is uploading a list to our platform, we deduplicate that list. If someone has your number on a list 5 different times for whatever reason, they have 3 or 4 different brands in their portfolio and they're sending a mass kind of text message to all the brands, that you won't get that message 5 times if that's being sent from Klickrr, because again, Prashant built a system that thought about that and said, we deduplicate that. So we don't charge our clients for sending multiple messages, which would upset the client. And we also don't charge, we don't allow the recipient to receive them to be on a list multiple times. So there are things that can be done so that you don't create negative brand equity, if you will, by entering into this more intimate inbox. So it's not just a free for all, but it is a sacred space, to your point, Jason. Yes.
So I think what you're saying is customers, your brand's customers, will respect your restraint, but you have to exercise it.
For sure.
And what do you think in terms of segmentation? Because in the email world, the marketing automation world, the CDP world, etc., we have the ability to get hyper granular with our segmentation to where we can, the old world of batch and blast emails has largely gone away, thank God. Some brands still do it because they're just lazy. It's not because the technology isn't there, it's just because they're lazy. But the better brands, they always hyper segment their lists. They're very targeted. The campaigns are hyper targeted. The promotions are very targeted. The discounts are targeted. It's not just a site-wide sale in many cases anymore. It's targeted literally down to the individual. Amazon's a master at this. Other brands are masters at this. Do you recommend and do you help your merchants to segment their lists in such a way that we are likely to get a better response rate, a better conversion rate, et cetera, a better open rate, because we're being much more targeted and thoughtful in what we're sending? And to take a page out of the email world, we're not gonna batch and blast text messages just like we wouldn't batch and blast emails anymore. Do you help brands understand what segmentation looks like in the SMS world?
Yes, absolutely. And I see segmentation is more about data segregation. If you have lots and lots of data around either email ID or around phone numbers, then based on the data, based on the metadata, you segment your list, whether it is email list or texting list. So if the customers, for example, one of my customers does have the data, they know the order number, they know the average ticket size of the customer. So they will club certain customers in certain bins and send the messages on a certain day at certain time for those customers. For the bigger customers, they will choose different day after salary day or something, because they will have more money in their pocket. So naturally, they will be able to spend a lot more money. So stuff like this happens all the time with my customers. And it's just about data. It's not much about the phone numbers or SMS or emailing. It is actually about the meta information. If we have the data, then yes, segmentation is highly recommended for any channel, not just for texting or emailing. And data is the king nowadays. So yeah, absolutely.
And as I mentioned earlier about keywords, that's another way that we can use to segment data. So as people are joining your list, you can create multiple different keywords. If you are attending different conferences, for example, and you're doing a road show and you want everyone from this conference to be on one list and everyone from that conference to be on a list, and maybe the Atlanta conference, they're texting ATL and joining the list. Whereas the New York conference, they text NYC to join your list. So now you end up having 2 separate lists. And then from there, you can segment those lists from there. So we definitely, again, to Prashant's point, it is about the data, and it is about segmenting it down so that your messages can be as relevant as possible. The words that you send, the time that you send it, the cadence that you're sending it, you want to be as relevant as possible so that you don't disrupt the recipient's desire to receive those messages.
And do you guys have out-of-the-box integrations with any marketing automation or CDP platforms where you can pull in profile properties from those platforms like a Klaviyo or a Klickrr or some other platform, a segment platform? Or do you expect the brands would typically do the segmentation in their marketing automation platform, in their CDP platform, then they would export that list out of those platforms into Klickrr? So I guess how much segmentation is done within Klickrr versus external to Klickrr and then imported into Klickrr, I guess is my question.
Again, it depends on the customer. So we do have inbuilt segmentation techniques and inbuilt segmentation essentially, right, within our platform. So you can segment the data based on the meta information that you're going to upload to Klickrr. So it is possible. Also encourage, so more than the segmentation from at the customer side, we ask the customers to capture more and more data, even if it looks irrelevant right now. Eventually, it will be relevant. To say this way, it's not much about whether you do segmentation on our platform or your platform. You at least do the segmentation. That is more important. And then just focus on when to send the message, what to send in the message. Yeah.
And do you have a deliverability or a kind of in the email world, say in Klaviyo or whatever, they'll have a deliverability score that they'll give to an email. They'll check the subject line, they'll check the body, they'll check the size, they'll check the size of images, the weightings. They will measure that up against some of the criteria for getting into the Apple inbox, Gmail inboxes, etc. Do you have an inbox deliverability score or an open score rating, a click-through score that you help rate when somebody's putting together a campaign inside your platform? How do you help them? Because if I'm brand new to this, like I'm not an expert. I might be an email expert, but it doesn't mean by definition I'm automatically going to be an SMS expert. I most likely am not going to be when I first start working with you. So what kind of tooling do you have to help these brands level up their text game fast so that they don't have to go through a bunch of trial and error to get that refined to the point where people are likely to open it, likely to respond to it, likely to drive orders from it, and likely to remain interested and subscribed to the text list in the first place? Because I'd hate for these brands to have to learn the hard way, oh God, okay, we screwed up here. We shouldn't have sent this text this way.
Okay. Bianca, you want to take this question?
Sure. A couple of things I can mention, and then I'll hand it over to you. So in the Klickrr platform, in the Outbox page, which is the page where you compose a text message, we have crafted there. So the simple answer to your question, there's not a score. We have crafted this page in a way that makes it foolproof and walks you through how to create a text message that has the most optimal anatomy, I guess is the best way I can say that. So things like identifying yourself. So instead of you just having a free text open box to just write whatever, we've broken it down and said you need to identify yourself, right? So you can't hit send until you fill out this section that says, who is this message coming from? Now we auto-populate it, again, try to make it easier for our clients. We auto-populate it with the name of the company that you already gave us when you were signing up. So it will say Klickrr there. If you want to change it to say Bianca from Klickrr or like Klickrr Sales or something else that is a little bit more targeted or whatever, you can put some editable, but we've auto-populated and you can't send it without that. Also, if it's a new list that is being uploaded, you never text this list before, we have a field that says welcome text, which means we are guiding you to say, hey, Jason, nice running into you at the conference, or putting something there that said, great to see you today, or nice meeting you at whatever in Atlanta, whatever it is. So if it's a brand new list, you cannot send a message without putting something there. Of course, you can hack around it and say, I don't want to put welcome text. I'm just going to put the beginning of my message there or something like that. But it's there to make it clear that you have not messaged these people before and they're going to be confused if they get a message out of the blue without knowing who's sending them this message from this 1-800 number and without knowing, wait a minute, where did I meet this person? So those two things. Then you have the message box that you can enter in your message. And alongside of this is a preview of what that message is going to look like. So if you want to put any space breaks in it, or if you realize that your link is super long, we have a link shortener feature as well that you can use to go and create a Klickrr short link. So you shorten that really long Google Doc link or whatever it is that you're sending them down to something that's about 10 to 15 characters that you can fit in there. And we also have a few things to help you manage your budget, I guess you would say that, because it does cost, to Prashant's point, to send a text message. So we have a counter at the bottom that counts the number of characters in the message and then multiplies that by the number of people on your list, which is super important because some of the lists build dynamically, right? So if you have a keyword and you're doing a speech at a conference or you're on a podcast, you're saying, hey guys, text this. But at the beginning of the podcast, maybe 3 people have texted it. By the end of the podcast, you might have 100 people. So it tells you that if you send this message right now, because you might not know how many people are on that list because it builds dynamically, that this message has 150 characters, which is considered one message segment, and you have 500 people on your list. It's gonna cost you 500 credits or message segments to send this. So you can know before you send it what you're getting yourself into. And then you can send it now, you can schedule it for later, you can set up a recurring message, you can save it as a template if you need to come back to it later. So all of those things are there to help you. Also, our company will take you through the process of standing up your phone number. That's something that we also do, which means finding the number. If you need a specific number, a vanity number, if you will, that can be helpful in some cases. A short code if you need a very high volume phone number, or if you need a shorter code for that's just more expensive, but we can do that. And validating that number, sending all of your information to the carrier to make sure your messages are not filtered. So there's no score per se, but I think that to answer your question on that compose page, those pieces are there to walk anyone through, the do-it-yourselfer, to walk you through some of the major parts of developing a text message that won't drive people to opt out. One last thing I'll mention before I turn over to Prashant is that all the messages that are sent to lists that have not been messaged before, in addition to that welcome text, we automatically put stop to opt out on them. You don't have to put it on every single message. It's recommended that you do, but if you put it on the first message you send someone, they obviously can scroll back up and see how to opt out. But we automatically put that there, and we automatically create 3 compliance keywords for every account. That's stop, help, and start. So stop to opt out, start to opt back in. And whenever you opt out, you'll receive a message saying you've opted out, reply start to opt back in if it was an accident, and help if there's information that your team has that if somebody is like, yeah, I can't figure this thing out, it's okay, we'll call this number or whatever. So we do all of these things in addition to a ton of other compliance stuff that's happening in the background to make sure that the DIYers or people who are not text experts can send healthy, relevant text message campaigns that people actually do want to receive. How'd I do, Prashant?
Oh, excellent. Couldn't have. I could not have spoken like this. You're simply amazing. Just to add few things. I'll again say, emailing is different than texting. In texting, there are 160 characters and there are no colors, right? Yeah, email is so, that world is so different. So the deliverability and all those things are different measures in emails and texting. Texting is, just like I was saying, texting is very active. It's very immediate. So if you're going to send the message, there is the 95% of the messages will get read within 30 minutes. So it's very different. And how much creative can you be? You have to be creative in 160 characters, but you cannot be color conscious in texting world. So the parameters of evaluating a good text message versus a good email is very different. A good text message is also about, obviously it is about the concise message, so that whatever you're going to send the message, like, or whatever. So it's more about just tell in short words, what do you want to convey? If it's a deal going on, if you want to say something urgent, as opposed to you explaining. Email is, in emailing, you have the luxury of explaining, showing that, okay, this is how, like in case of e-commerce, and you can show that, okay, this is the new line of products that we have. So you can show the numbers. In texting, you have to say that, okay, this is that we have a new line of products. Click here to have a look, right?
Whatever.
Right. So the world is very different. And then in texting, you have to schedule the campaign right. And once you do it, there is a guarantee. There is a much higher probability that the message will be seen, and almost 50% of the messages that are delivered will get clicked as well in texting world.
Right.
Those are the numbers. So the numbers are astronomical. So deliverability is very different concept, and it's more about not just the text inside the text. It's actually also about who you're sending, what are you sending, when are you sending, how frequently you're sending the message.
Yeah, I guess text is to email as X or Twitter is to Facebook, right? We can think of it. We can think of it like that. We can think of it like, hey, look, you've got to be brief within certain guardrails on X if you want to get cut through with your message, and you want it to be consumed and you want it to be seen. And they're going to limit you. They're going to physically limit you to the number of characters that you can send. Same with text messaging. There's a physical limit to how many characters you can send, and you can be creative, but you have to be creative within certain guardrails. And I think that's the key here. And what if you were to look out 12, 18, 24 months from now, what are your customers asking for? Anything that you don't yet do, or are you seeing any other gaps or opportunities in the market that you don't yet service, that you say, hey, look, in 12 months, we're going to be adding XYZ to our platform?
So there are different verticals that we are trying to get into, and those are the things that, like for example, I think that we are doing pretty good as far as the e-commerce are concerned. Like with the e-commerce, it's easy, not easy, but we have figured it out per se.
There's a model. There's a model there for you to follow.
It's a model. It's a model, right? That how do you acquire the customers? You give them the relevant coupon codes or information, and they will come back to your website on time every time. For the non-profits, it's similar model. You send the campaign, you tell them that okay, this is the time when our donation box is open, and you can send the donation. But there are other verticals that we are exploring still. So those are the verticals that we both would love to foray into and find out how to help the customers, how to understand the business needs, because every market is very different. For example, lawn mowing is very different. It's very time sensitive based on the geography as well. So one of our customers is in North Dakota. So there the lawn mowing is supposed to happen in certain months only. So the type of customer is very different, right? And imagine, so again, since you're talking so much about email, like emailing, you can broadcast to all the customers throughout the country, but try sending the SMS throughout the country at the same time, right? Because someone is in EST, someone is in PST, people will start shouting, right? And it's also about the location and the service that the customer is supposed to give as well. So if you're supposed to give lawn mowing services, and if you're living in North Dakota, try to send the message in December.
You'll get
right?
no response.
You'll get no response.
It's under a foot of snow. So
right.
and does that also, I guess, when we start thinking about verticalization and we think about different business models and we think about different brands and the way they operate, what is your split today? Because I work super heavily now. For the first 3/4 of my career, I was working in the B2C and D2C world. Now I work very heavily in the B2B e-commerce world. What is the split of the brands that you're working with, B2C versus B2B? I'm guessing it heavily skews towards the B2C, D2C world, but are B2Bs starting to get text religion as well, in the same way that retail brands have gotten or are starting to get text religion?
Yes, I'll answer that question. Yes, everybody's interested. Going back to the example I gave of social and banner ads and things that were reserved for personal communication before they were picked up by businesses as an opportunity to communicate with an ever fragmented consumer attention span, if you will. Yes, I literally just got, that was the call I was on earlier before this, just talking to them about ways that we can use it to drive traffic to events or to create a more efficient operation. So it might be a different use case for some of these larger corporations. It might be for employee alerts and notification, or multi-factor authentication for security of their system. So we are having these conversations with really large companies that are starting to see in some cases, their email and social campaigns that are not as effective as they used to be, and are looking for other communications channels to add to their marketing mix to drive that engagement. And yes, the channel as a whole is maturing when people start to see that there are analytics, there are metrics here that you can use, and you can sit this alongside of some of your other communications channels and say, oh, it's not just I sent the message and I just don't know what happened. There's actually engagement metrics here, and we can treat this as a bona fide marketing channel, communications, promotions channel, and it can work. You just have to know what you're doing. And so when they start engaging with us as a set of co-founders or our team members, they start to think of it a little bit differently. So yes, we're heavily, to your point, to your suspicion, you're right, B2C, and starting to have conversations more with the larger enterprise types of companies.
Makes complete sense. And how do you guys make your money? Because the carriers charge a fee, right? The carriers charge a fee to deliver the message, et cetera. So there's a cost structure to your infrastructure. There's a cost structure for your systems, for your segmentation, for your analytics, for your opt-in, opt-out management, all that sort of stuff. There's a cost base for you guys to run the service. Then there's the delivery costs to use the networks to get the messages delivered. And I'm guessing you just charge a margin on top of that for your profit. So is it a per message fee effectively that you guys charge, and that covers the expenses to deliver the message as well as a margin for you?
It depends. So that's a great question. We operate in two different ways. We have some people that use the platform on their own. And in that case, it's very similar to what you just described. The volume of messages that you're sending, we're kind of price per message. Pretty simple. And that includes like your phone number, that includes all the compliance stuff we talked about, that includes, all of the short links that I mentioned previously, that includes keywords. All of those things are baked into the price per message, so on and so forth. But then the majority of our clients are working together with us in partnership to manage their SMS campaigns. And in that case, it's more of a service-based offering. So then it becomes more of how much service do you need wrapped around this platform, and then we price accordingly. So
more like an agency model in that scenario.
Yes.
Makes complete sense. How is the best way? Hours absolutely flown by. It's been a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate you spending your time with me today. If people want to learn more, I'll drop a link to both of your LinkedIn profiles into the show notes, as well as the link to the Klickrr website in the show notes. But other than that, if people want to reach out to you and find out more about text messaging as part of their overall comms and business planning and campaign management, what's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
They can create their own account over at system.klickrr.com and get started right away. The most important thing to know is that Klickrr is spelled with a K. So it starts with a K. I think you can see it here. Klickrr. So Klickrr. So all of our properties are Klickrr.com website, at Klickrr on Instagram. And you can just search for Klickrr on LinkedIn and Facebook, and we're active there as well. So you can, if you'd like to get in contact with us on our website, we have a contact form. You can set up a call with someone in sales or someone to just talk more about the platform and how it would be useful to you, or drop us a DM over on Instagram and we'll message you back over there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Now, as we come down to the end of our time together, this is where I get to flip the script. I get to hand the microphone over to you guys. I get to let you ask me one question. Any question you like, can be personal or professional. So over to you guys over at Klickrr. What is your question for me today?
So I see that your e-commerce edge, right? So what's the why e-commerce? I'm really interested in e-commerce, especially because of Klickrr as well. I mean, Klickrr deals heavily in e-commerce. So what's your forte as far as e-commerce is concerned, and why do you call yourself as e-commerce edge?
The e-commerce edge is actually my podcast. So I've got an e-commerce podcast. We drop 3 episodes a week. We have over 430 episodes in our back catalog, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show. And so that's a standalone entity, sub brand underneath the Jason Greenwood brand. I'd like to think I've got a pretty decent personal brand out there in the market. I got over 33,000 followers now on LinkedIn, and I put out a ton of content almost every single day around the e-commerce space. But how I make my money, my bread and butter, is as an e-commerce consultant, and that's Greenwood Consulting. And so we primarily consult to B2B businesses, but we have sort of 4 strings to our bow. When we first started out the consultancy, we worked purely with merchants and consulted to merchants, helped them with platform and technology search and select, solution architecture, partner search and select. We would help them with everything all the way from concept right through to helping them get to a BRD phase where they could work with an agency partner to get a quote and get delivery done. But latterly, over the last couple of years, we've had to expand our services because we're getting requests for it. And so we now also work with agencies who want to establish a B2B practice inside their business, and maybe they've never done B2B before and they don't really know where to start with that. We also work with investors that want to invest in the B2B commerce space. And then we also work with platform vendors that work in or want to work in the B2B space. We help them with their go-to-market. We help them with their positioning. We help them with their technical roadmaps. We help them with their partnership models, all that sort of stuff. So, but it's very heavily focused on B2B, and it's very much a blue ocean space, much like text messaging. I think B2B e-commerce in particular is probably 5 to 10 years behind its B2C or D2C counterpart. So it's still pretty immature, but maturing fast. And COVID put lit a fire under a lot of these B2B sellers who couldn't, during COVID, they couldn't have field sales reps going out and talking to customers. They couldn't knock on doors. They couldn't do all those things. And they realized, man, we better establish some digital routes to market. Otherwise, we're going to be in deep trouble. So that's the space I work in.
Well, That is fascinating. Thank you for sharing that, Jason. I have a question. At the beginning, you talked about your background and all of the lovely places that you have been. And as someone who has traveled to approximately, I don't know, 16 or 17 different African countries, I myself am someone who loves to travel and loves to get deep into different cultures and understand different places and languages and food and stuff like that. My question for you is, what led you to all of those different places? And what is your favorite place that you have lived?
Yeah, look, it's super interesting. I don't really play favorites, but I will tell you that growing up in Southern California, I think most Americans, it's almost unthinkable for most Americans to consider visiting another country is one thing, and travel, and more Americans now are traveling than ever before. Although I think the latest stats are still greater than 50% of Americans don't even have a passport. There is something about traveling, but most Americans wouldn't ever consider living in another country. Having said that, there's over 1.6 million Americans now living in Mexico. So it's definitely becoming a thing, particularly as people are struggling, for example, in retirement to be able to afford their retirement. And the cost of living in Mexico is definitely less than it is in America, less than it is in Australia, less than it is in New Zealand. We bought this place here, this townhouse that we live in. We just bought it. And it cost us about 1/6 of what the equivalent townhouse would cost us in Auckland, New Zealand. It's a significantly lower cost of living. That wasn't our primary motivation of moving here. It's a side benefit, but it wasn't our primary motivation of moving here. Loved living in New Zealand, but I don't know if you guys know, but during COVID, New Zealand was one of the most locked down countries in the entire world. And it was locked down for over 3 years. And for my wife and I, who are like you, big travelers, and we love exploring new cultures and foods and languages and everything else, not being able to travel for over 3 years was really problematic for us, especially because New Zealand is so remote and it's so far away from the rest of the world that if you can't travel, it's pretty tough. And then combined with the fact that the North American market is definitely the hotbed, the North American market and the UK in particular, a hotbed for e-commerce innovation and e-commerce demand. And I already had a lot of clients based in Europe and in North America. And so getting back closer to that core market where I could speak at events and speak at conferences, that was a lot of the motivation of being here as well. Food, culture, lifestyle. Mexico's very non-woke, which is amazing. Much more of a traditional culture. So we love that. So there was lots of things that pulled us here. I have traveled a fair bit around the world, traveled a fair bit in Europe. So every culture I find has its sweet spot. It's got its uniqueness that makes it really rich. And the Latin American cultures in particular, they're old cultures. They're old countries. They're not young. New Zealand is a very young country. Australia, very young country. America, very young country. And so definitely exploring cultures that are older, have more of a history to them, they know who they are. When we think about Mexico, for example, 82% Roman Catholic. And regardless of whether you're religious or not, you have to say that religion binds a culture together in ways that is difficult to get any other way. And so the priorities in this culture, I guess it's probably similar to, I've got friends from cultures all around the world, but older cultures in general, they have more cohesiveness to them because of their history. And oftentimes that history is intertwined with religious and cultural beliefs that have come down through centuries in many cases, and it binds them together. And yeah, that's a very long-winded way of saying, I love travel, I love living in new places, I love exploring new cultures. And my wife is Asian. She was born and raised in New Zealand, but she's half Chinese, half Vietnamese, mother Chinese, father Vietnamese. I like intercultural exchange on every level. I think it develops our empathy gene. I think it helps us to see the world through somebody else's eyes. And it makes us better business people too. I think we can take ideas from one culture and translate those into other cultures and where we're operating. And it just makes us a more well-rounded human being, more well-rounded business person. I just can't recommend travel and living in different countries highly enough. Thank you guys for your time. Really appreciate it. Can't wait to speak to you again soon.
Thank you so much, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
Are you a B2B or D2C e-commerce merchant? then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to learn how we can help you scale your business.